Hey friends, thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation Dick and I had with Jordon Musser. During winter break, Dick and I had the opportunity to speak with Jordon, a 4-time Rotax national champion, 5-time SKUSA shifter kart champion, professional sports car racer, and the engineering mind behind Musser Technical and its product line for karting. As you'll hear, Jordon is proof that you don't have to start at age 5 to become a champion. He got into karting in college, turned the late start into a championship-winning career spanning over 25 years, and built a business solving the practical problems that frustrated him as a racer and a coach, all guided by one philosophy: time should be spent on track, not wrenching. Our conversation covers a documentary Dick recently released featuring Jordon, how his engineering background and masters in business inform both his racing and product development, what families really need to invest in if they want their young driver to develop properly, and the critical difference between seat time and purposeful practice. Jordon also shares insights on the brutal reality of the ladder to Formula One and why he's passionate about sharing everything he's learned rather than gatekeeping his knowledge. But before we get to our conversation, I need to ask, can you help us out? If this show adds value to your F1 experience, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. Share this episode with other F1 fans. That's how people find us, and it's how we keep growing this community. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Well, Dick, I just am excited. I feel like I say that almost in every episode that I'm excited
Exactly.
because it's another opportunity for us to get to talk about the thing that we love, which is motorsport, Formula One, all different types of motorsport. And today we're having a conversation with someone who is a friend of yours. And I think it's only appropriate for you to introduce them.
Yeah, that's great. Sabrina and to all our listeners, super excited to be able to bring Jordon Musser on for this evening. Jordon, if you race karts in North America, you know who Jordon is. Jordon is a 5-time Pro Tour champion with Superkarts USA. He's won the Rock Vegas event a couple of times. He's represented the United States at the Rotax World Finals multiple times. He's probably lost count, but he was there a lot. You name it, Jordon's probably won it. I think Jordon brings not only a lot of talent and skill to this conversation, but he also I think he's one of the more cerebral drivers that I've ever met, quite frankly. I've met a lot of racing drivers over the years, and he brings a lot of deep analysis into what he does. What makes it great when you have a conversation with Jordon is he's not only fast, he understands why he's fast. There's some drivers who can't tell you why they're fast, but that's not Jordon. And I think that for our fans who maybe don't know all the nuances of the sport, I think Jordon's going to be somebody that's going to be really super helpful. And when I wind up talking with Jordon, I find myself asking all sorts of geeky driving questions. So I think that's kind of where we're going to go. So without any further ado, Jordon, welcome. We're super glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to share my experiences and a little bit about how I think about motorsports.
That's awesome. Before we start, Sabrina, did you know that there are 3 types of people in North American karting? Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, there's basically, of the 3 types, there's those that have been beaten by Jordon Musser, those who are going to be beaten by Jordon Musser, and those who know people who have been beaten by Jordon Musser. Now, I'm in group number 1. Actually, Jordon's never beaten me. He's destroyed me. We'll go there.
I love it.
So starting off that way, Jordon, you got into the sport late. I think you were already in college when you got into the sport. Is that right?
Yeah, I was right before I turned 21, maybe mid-20, third year of college, and decided that I was going to move on and do something different with my motorsport sickness. So up to that point, I'd raced RC cars growing up. Love motorsports, love racing. There wasn't a budget to race karts. I think like a lot of kids maybe want to be fighter pilots or whatever. I want to be a race car driver. It wasn't really an achievable goal. It wasn't like a realistic goal, but it was something I wanted to do. And I saw friends I raced RC cars with move on to karting and have success. And so I followed the karting stuff and really wanted an opportunity to do that. And I was autocrossing a little bit. If you're not from the autocrossing, it's basically running a car around cones in a parking lot. Anybody can do it. There's everything from a Camry to a Ferrari. It's like anything you want to drive around cones is fast. And I did that with my street car at Camaro. And a friend of mine who's actually an ex-professional driver, Eric Cullenberg, rode with me. And he said, you're like really good at, I had won some stuff, so I know I wasn't bad at it. But he's like, no, you understand. You have like the feel, the touch. And I never really raced before. I'd driven RC cars, but I'd never been behind the wheel, especially of even a proper race car, let alone go kart. Sure. And we talked about it a little bit. We kind of went our separate ways. And about 3 months later, I had an opportunity where I had about $10,000 to my name. I'd sold an engine I'd built actually for my Camaro and decided to fund my first year of karting with that $10,000. It's literally every penny I had. And as you know from your karting expenditures, $10,000 is many people's one weekend budget.
Yeah, right.
So Eric helped me out a ton financially, but also his expertise. And we went through a little bit of Yamaha stuff, then moved quickly to Rotax, and ultimately won our first Rotax national title in the first year of racing. Yeah. So that was kind of the catalyst that then launched all the rest of the opportunities I've had since then.
And that Rotax championship that you won, that was, I think, out in Vegas, but it basically punched your ticket then to go on and race internationally, because that qualified you to represent the United States in the worlds, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So actually I won Rock On Grand Prix, which qualified me for the Rotax Nationals, because at that point it was full. And the only way to qualify was to win Rock Island. That was literally the only way I could do it. And so went to Rock Island. It was kind of one of those up and down moments where I crashed in practice, which you never do there. It's like the one thing I teach people at street courses, do not crash. But we ended up recovering and driving from behind and winning the race, which got me to Las Vegas. And after winning that, got a chance to race overseas. So it was a really cool experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. How many times did you go to the World Finals?
So 4 times. It was South Africa, Canary Islands, Egypt, and Portugal. Varying challenges. I think as I progressed, remember, this is my first year of karting. It was my first world championship. You can imagine what that was like. But, so as I progressed through those 4 opportunities, I learned a lot of things. I got a lot faster. I learned how to adapt to new tracks and just new conditions I'd never done before. But unfortunately, luck was not with me the last couple of years. I think the first year I had pretty good luck, actually, other than crashed in one of the heat races. But overall, the experience was what I expected, I guess, out of the level of seat time I had. By the end, I was kind of frustrated because I felt like we had a chance to kind of finish top 5 and just never really did it. That's racing. There's high, low lows.
For sure. So did you have any kind of family history in motorsport, or are you the first to say, yeah, this is what I want to go do?
My dad, being a mechanical engineer, as am I, he into cars. I think all engineers are a little bit into cars because they're neat and there's all the intricacies of designing them and all that. But so he was a car guy. He had a Camaro, and he did some drag racing like that. He even raced a couple kart races back in the 90s, but never competitively. A couple club races or something like that. So I'm kind of the first of my family to really dive in and pursue this as a career, even if that's taking me on a slightly meandering road and not typical of a, say, professional driver. So I'm kind of the first of the family to do it.
For me, it was pretty similar. My dad was always interested in cars and racing. And I can remember I grew up when I was really young. I was in Hawaii, and I can remember going and watching guys like Ken Miles and Peter Revson and guys like that with the Shelby Cobras. They'd come over and race as part of the demonstration with, Sports Car Club of America on a airport circuit, that kind of stuff. So it's always been kind of one of my things as well. But I was the first in my family to actually go out and start racing. So, and
probably because of that, my experience is a little bit different. My parents actually got divorced when I was pretty young. So when I was racing Arctic cars, my mom, single parent, dropped me off at the track. She'd have to go to work or something. I'd stay at the racetrack all day and practice RC cars, and then she'd pick me up. So I had to learn how to work on them, deal with relatively low budgets and how to reuse parts and borrow tires and all that kind of stuff. So definitely character building for me growing up, doing that as kind of really by myself.
Do you think that those kinds of things, though, are what instills the passion for the sport, the stick-to-itness? You and I have both seen kids where their parents fund everything, and the moment that mom and dad decide that they're spending too much money, the kid is out of the sport, never to return again. Do you think that that is something that instills that in you, the fact that you've just had to scrape to be able to go do it in the first place?
Yeah, I have to really want to do this or I can't do it. And even today, I mean, at the level I compete at now, it's very expensive. Yes, I'm, have a career and I make decent money, but I've somehow managed to find and spend more on motorsports. So it still gets, at percentage wise, probably just as expensive as ever been. So I think
Yep.
for me, I'm just so committed to it that it's not an option to fail and it's not an option to quit because I have a lot of sunk cost in this. And it's a passion, whether it's in the pits, building things. I mean, I was just in the garage earlier working on a car or driving. So it's kind of through and through the heart of who I am.
I get it. When did you realize that you had a real talent for this sport? And what was it, do you think, that made you realize that you had it? I mean, was it a race win or what was it? Just Eric talking to you?
I think I knew I had mechanical aptitude. In other words, I had a connection to things mechanical when I was really young. I could take things apart, put them together. But, rolling in the next phase of that, my brother bought a manual transmission car. I remember he was learning how to drive it. And I was 16 at the time. And I could just hop in it and drive it. Like, I didn't have to learn how to drive a clutch. Like me, I had to kind of figure it out, but I was able to immediately drive the car. And he took a little while. And so that's what I was like, I knew I had a feel for what a car, I could feel the mechanics of the car. I could feel the clutch slipping, which in a race car maybe is not so critical, but the same thing, a brake rotor is the same as a clutch disc. The feeling is very similar. So I knew how to feel for it. I did a little drag racing in high school at a Camaro at the drag strip and bracket raced and won a lot of that. So what I was doing, I knew I was pretty good at. But the real catalyst was Eric telling me that because, one, I have a lot of respect for him in his racing career. And then you're winning the Rotax Nationals in less than a year. Participating as a driver was huge. And I knew I had some balance of talent and work ethic, which is key, obviously. And I think I have some opinions on what that really means, but I knew I had some combination that would result in ongoing success to some level.
No, that's really cool. Sabrina, do you have anything you want to throw in while we're talking about this? Because we're always about the development of young drivers and that sort of thing.
Well, I'm enjoying hearing Jordon's story because where I got to be introduced to Jordon was actually through your documentary. And Jordon is featured in that. And now to hear a little bit more of your backstory is really inspiring. I think that what I really have appreciated listening to you is that as Dick introduced you, that you have a more cerebral approach. But hearing you say that there was also a feel and how you balance that as a person who tends, and I think everyone in our audience knows this, I come from a much more analytical approach to life. So I have a high respect for somebody who also seeks to develop their craft with an analytical, but also there is some natural intuition that comes there and how you have to balance knowing when to give the gas and when to give the brake to either of those. So that's really, I think for any listener who is a racer, I think that wanting to emulate that is probably a really good thing, to not give one weight too far in either direction, to allow you then to have what you have already told us, the quick, rapid rise in these new areas. I think that's one of the markers of someone who knows how to find balance.
I always say, people ask me, what age you have to start racing, things like that. And, I truly believe talent is born. You either have what it takes to be a top level at whatever you want to do, play the clarinet, drive a race car, play football, whatever it is. You're born with a certain amount of talent, but stars are made. True, you can be a 10 out of 10 talent and end up a 5 out of 10 player or race car driver if you don't put in the effort, don't have the right people around you, the resources. So I think they're both equivalent important, as well as analytical approach and a feel. If you don't have the feel, you'll never be a star. But if you're very analytical, you can bridge that gap. And most people have some variance of that. Verstappen has a 10 out of 10 across the board, right? That's why he's so dominant. And I'd put Oscar and the other top guys right now completely in the same category. But at just below that, you have some balance of, they're a 10 out of 10 on feel and an 8 out of 10 on technical. And maybe the next guy is inverse on that, but they're both so high, they're both equally competitive. And you'll find the guy that's all about the feel is probably quicker in the rain, for example, where the guy that's technical can run the pace in the dry, maybe slightly slower in the rain. They get better for feedback to their engineers, those kinds of things.
Interesting. I had never thought about that, but you're right. Because when it starts raining, I mean, you'd be crazy to bet against Max.
Of
you
course.
know,
No matter
right?
what the car is doing that at that point in time.
Exactly. No, that's really interesting. Well, that I'm going to use that as a little bit of a segue, Jordan, and ask some of these driving questions. And in kind of the place where I'm coming at it from is that we do have a lot of new motorsports fans in the United States, courtesy of Drive to Survive, right? And they've become more and more interested in the sport. I've met a number of people who have been listening to this podcast who really use this podcast to bring themselves more up to speed about what the sport is really all about. And one of the items that I wanted to discuss with you is you and I had a conversation in Vegas about 2 years ago. And I had made the comment to you that in watching you drive, it was very clear that every time you line up somebody to make a pass, you're going through a mental calculation. And there's times where you'll catch somebody and you'll immediately attack and get around them. And there's other times where you'll catch somebody and you'll actually sit there for a lap or two and think about, okay, where's the best place to attack? When should I attack? Those kinds of things. And I thought it was super, super instructional. I was wondering if you could kind of run through that thought process again for our listeners.
Yeah, part of it is the technical, how you actually line the pass up to achieve a high percentage of not crashing. But as far as setting up the pass, there's really three pieces to it. It's pretty straightforward. One is, where are you strong? Two, where are they weak? And third is surprise. Those are the three modes of a pass, no matter what the motorsport is. So if you're very strong in the section, they're very weak in, you're going to pass them without needing any surprise. If you are equivalent, in other words, your weak area is also their weak area, your strong area is also their strong area, the only way you're going to pass them, even if you're faster by, we're talking about small margins here, is going to be surprise, which means you do something they would never expect. An example of that would be, I think it was 2017 or 18 in Phoenix. Driver's in front of me, very talented guy, he's leading the race, slightly faster than him, but there was no way I was going to pass him. Where I was better, he was really strong, wasn't good enough to get alongside of him. And he was also blocking into turn one and moving over on me, but every lap. So it was just enough where I couldn't really get set up on him. And he would look over his shoulder. I believe he was doing that to make sure the officials knew he was looking and wasn't moving over on me. And what I realized is he does that, I'm never going to get by him because he's going to see me go and make this run. So what I did is I stayed the other side of him, waited till after he looked, and then drove down the inside. I just dove super late. And for the record, that ended in a crash. So it did not. I just love this story because it's like almost textbook like. It was, by the way, I was behind him for 19 of 20 laps. I was done following him. It was either going to win or crash. I'd already decided the only I'm going to class him, I'm going to win or crash. And we pushed each other a little bit afterwards and had some words. We're friends today. You know who he is. But yeah, it was just good, hard racing. But in that case, it was one of those rare occurrences where I was a half tenth faster a lap. But where I was getting a half tenth, he was also pretty decent and I wasn't going to pass him. So I needed all the surprise I could handle. And I even surprised myself, unfortunately. But yeah, that's the three elements: weakness, strength, and surprise.
In the documentary, we saw you battling with Antonio Pizzonia. And that guy, you got around him at the starts. But on the other hand, then he would come in and pounce, obviously kind of sizing you up as well. And I guess my question is that in retrospect, do you think there was any other way that you might have been able to handle a guy like that? I mean, he's an ex-Formula One driver, so he's probably seen it all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of it as, he's an ex-Formula driver. I think he's just a talented driver that I'm competing against.
Yeah.
I don't think his style and his approach to racing me was any different than any other of the top guys. Everyone at the front is very aggressive. They will push you, but they won't put you in the wall. They won't crash you. They will rub you, little Days of Thunder reference. But that's true. People at the front, they end up with rubber marks all up and down their go-karts, but they finish most of the time because they know what they can get away with. And they trust their competitors to push them to the edge, but not crash them. So for me, it wasn't about, being an ex-Formula One driver. For me, it was just, I didn't have the pace. So what we did, I made sure I was really aggressive on lap one because that was the only I was going to have a chance. And he knew that. So I think he also gave me more room than he normally would have because he knew I had nothing to lose and he had everything to lose. I was going to push 100% the first lap and risk crashing because that was the only way I was going to even have a chance at getting away. When you know you don't have pace to win, one of the tactics, is to get the guy behind you to get shuffled into a pack, and then he's stuck dealing with other people and you can get away. So that was really my strategy. I didn't have the pace. Most of it was motor. I mean, we knew that going into it. We don't have a strong, PSL doesn't have a strong rock program. We have a great KZ program, but our motor program was that good. And that's why the next weekend or 2 weeks later at Super Nats, I was quicker than him.
Way quicker.
Great motor package. So I think it's all about just being aware that he was faster. And the lap time doesn't lie. If he's faster, he's faster. So I decided I was not going to beat him on pace. And so I need to come up with other ways to do it. And so I was just really aggressive the first couple laps. And that's why you saw that play out over and over.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you made some just fantastic starts, And so anyway, very interesting.
Can I interrupt really quick?
Go for it.
So when I'm listening to you, Jordon, as a non-racer, I'm wondering, how are you making those calculations? Is that happening in real time? Is that part of your pre-race strategy? You've watched video or you've done enough competition with this person to kind of know this is the way that he's likely going to approach? Do you see where I'm kind of driving at to help the rest of the non-racers listening?
Yeah, I categorize drivers more of like their level of aggression and how much they think about decisions they're going to make and what that result's going to be. So in his case, very aggressive, but also he's a very experienced driver. So if I send it down the inside and he knows he's faster than me, he's not going to risk crashing on the first lap. If I did the exact same thing and he thought I was faster, he'd probably risk crashing because he wouldn't want to risk me getting by him. So I do take that into account before the race starts so that I can kind of decide if we end up trying to occupy the same real estate, will I give up? And if I think he is likely to lose more than I am, I'm not going to give up, and they usually will. And I've only been involved in, I'm trying to think actually, I've been involved in a crash in a final in a major event like that. I can't remember the last time because I do change my style versus who I'm racing. And it's not just that they're weak or strong. It's that how they're going to approach the race. I do the same thing if I was him. I would let me go as well. Why would I risk crashing in turn one? This guy's crazy, me in this case, when I know I can catch him and pass him. And so he did exactly what I would have done, and ultimately it worked out for him.
That's awesome. Sabrina, anything else you wanted to ask on that? Or
No, I think that was great. I think that for those who aren't in the race seat, to understand the calculations, it feels, as I listen to you, a lot like chess, that you're thinking tactically as much as you are feeling the car. You're managing a lot while you're attempting to win the race. I think some people may look very superficial and just think, oh, it's a car going fast, thinking to go to the right or to the left of the opponent and avoiding a crash. But you're making multiple decisions ahead of time, or at least setting the stage to think through multiple scenarios. So that way, in those instants, you're not stopped by analysis. You're able to move through it fairly quickly.
Yeah, he's already thought about it.
Yeah. I don't necessarily know that, especially newer fans to motorsport and especially Formula One racing may realize that that's part of the racecraft that we talk about that needs to develop over time. And it does happen by being not just doing the laps on the track in practice, but actually competing and learning the process of competition itself.
Yeah, you go into it with an idea of what's going to happen. It's like the boxing quote, everyone has a plan to get punched in the face. You go into it with a plan. It doesn't always work. And that's that experience, like you said, that takes over. I did an endurance race. I know we'll probably talk about car stuff a little bit, but in an endurance race, I'll get passed or be passed hundreds, and I mean hundreds of times during the day. And it's not chance that I don't wreck the car. It's partly, yes, looking at my mirrors, looking at the cameras the car has and at that. But a part of it is a sixth sense that is developed over years and years of experience. It's like, can I hear someone's tire locking up and how far back is it? I'm not doing that. My brain is doing the calculation, but I'm not doing it consciously. It's all subconscious. So very few things can offset a lot of experience. And one of the things I'll come on to we didn't talk about is chassis setup matters too. At Rock, I did set up the car to be faster at the beginning and give up more at the end because I knew even a long run setup, which is what I'd normally do at a race like that, would not be enough to win. So my only chance at winning, I was this sure. This is very clear the plan of attack here. I plan to be fast at the beginning. The tires were set up for it. The chassis was set up for it. I drove like it was, and we just see where the chips would lie. And in this case, it didn't work out.
That's absolutely fascinating. So about a week ago, Peter Windsor in one of his podcasts made a really interesting comment about Oscar Piastri. And he said that he really felt like that for Oscar to take that next step up where he is capable of challenging Mac on a consistent basis, that he needs to learn how to shorten a track and how to more precisely modulate the throttle. Can you explain that for our listeners?
So it's actually something I teach. So it's important to me. And I think it's a change in the way drivers have actually attacked corners over the last maybe 10 or 15 years. It's partly as cars get faster, generate more grip, more power, but also not too much in driver development. But drivers are now starting at 5 years old and they're in a go-kart, every day or at least 3 or 4 days a week. And they are in a car 3-4 days a week once they turn 13, 14. So the quality of driver, in my opinion, has gotten much higher with every generation. And so you're learning new things on how to properly attack a corner. And what Peter's saying basically is a typical corner in a traditional textbook sense is you go into the corner and you turn the wheel smoothly until you get to the center of the corner and then you unwind the wheel. So you turn the wheel and unwind the wheel. Pretty basic. And that's the racing line most people would draw. The real racing line, and this is same in karting, it's the same in everything we do, is what I've heard referred to as spiral steer. I did not come up with it, but it's fantastic. In other words, you're steering slowly, and at the last minute at the apex, you make a big correction with the wheel. So you're like slowly, and then you turn quickly. The reason you do that is you only have 100% grip. So if you're braking with 100%, you have 0 for steering. You literally, if you're truly using 100% of your available traction to slow the car down, you can give it 0 steering. It'll just go straight. We've seen people lock up front tires and do that and go straight. So in reality, you're braking at like 98%. You're starting to turn the wheel. You can only turn 2%. You can't turn more than that. So the goal is to brake super deep, use a lot of the available grip to slow the car down while still turning a little bit. So you're starting your turning, you're starting to rotate. And then the moment the car is at its minimum speed and has all this grip available to turn. So you're going very slow. The brakes are way off because you're slowed down so much. You're only using 20% brakes. Now you have 80% steering you can give it. So instead of trying to blend the two and just get not much of anything, use all the brakes, then all the steering, then all the throttle. So that allows you to get more grip out of the car. One of the things I coach drivers a lot is all a driver is doing is weight management. So when they're on the brakes, the weight's on the front tires, it turns better. When they're on the throttle, the weight goes to the back, the tires grip better. When you're turning left, there's more grip on the outside. There's some nuances there because of what chassis actually do. But all you do is managing where the grip is. You want the car to turn better, put more weight on the front. You want the car to have more traction, put more weight on the back. So if you're really smooth and you do this slow turn and you're never really loading the car and giving it the grip at once, you're kind of being lazy. So when you attack the corner really hard and drive shallower in, you can use all that braking power to get the weight on the front end so you can start using more grip to get it turned. And the moment you get that big turn down, you start unwinding the wheel and you hit the throttle. If you do that correctly, the car's straight enough, you can use more throttle and then you get more weight on the rear tires, you get more grip. So it's kind of counterintuitive. People think of in their street cars, especially in the rain, they hit the throttle and it fishtails. But if you were to give it a throttle without it fishtailing, you actually have more traction. The weight goes backwards. We all know when you push the throttle down, your head hits the headrest. Well, the whole car is actually moving backwards. So if you can be more cautiously violent with the inputs, which is what the short line ends up doing, you build more grip than you would have otherwise. So that's the narrow drive line. You actually turn in at the braking point, move across the track a little bit. And so all this activity also results in a shorter driving distance. So physics dictate that if you're going a certain speed and you go a shorter distance, you're going to end up farther ahead. Pretty basic. So in this case, if you can carry the same average speed, so more on entry, but maybe less right at the middle, you're on a shorter trajectory, your lap time will be faster. So those are the two elements. There's one, which is literally the driving line is shorter. And that is like what he said and it's word for what it is. The line is shorter. But the bigger dynamic that separates the best from maybe the second best is the ability to dynamically blend your steering and braking on entry in the first third of the corner. Actually, I'd say that if you break a corner to fifths, which is what I do, the second and third fifth of a corner are what separates world champions from non-world champions. Anybody can exit the same. It's 90% the same. It's pretty easy. Most people can apply throttle on the street and kick the tail out and do that kind of stuff. Most enthusiasts can do that. Very few enthusiasts can do the equivalent of a tail slide on entry using the brakes. It's almost hard to even understand if you've never tried it before. So that's what he's talking about. He's trying to getting the wheel moved really slowly, but then doing a lot of turning right in the middle, which allows you to have actually more grip.
So you're saying that even in a kart, you use trail braking, basically, or what I call?
Yeah, so this is a good one. I don't call it trail braking. I've changed the way I think about this. What I do is I try to brake all the way to the apex. that results in a trail brake. So for those that don't know, a trail brake is basically saying you brake in a straight line, you start turning. I talked about earlier, if you're 100% brake, you can't turn. So you go to 80% brake, that's trailing off, trail braking. Then you can add 20% steering. If you go to 50% braking, you have 50% steering. It's not quite that easy, but that's what it is, right? And that's what I'm talking about. But I'm really focused on how can I brake all the way to the apex so that I'm driving really hard on the front of the car. I'm on the brakes all the way to my turning point. And then when I do finally make that big turn, that spiral where I'm like turn, and I make a big turn, I am at the slowest speed possible so that I can get back on the throttle. So yes, it's trail braking, but it's more aggressive than the way textbooks in the past have taught trail braking.
Interesting. Man, there's all sorts of things to try out once my knee heals. That's absolutely fascinating. Okay, man, I hope our audience is catching all this, because this is pure gold if you can just kind of apply it. So
you need my hands flopping around the screen, though. This is a podcast.
That's right.
I was thinking that we may have to find a way to have a narration added onto it so people will know, oh, right now Jordon is turning to the left and he's turning to the right. But they'll have to use their imagination or listen to this multiple times to be able to do that properly.
Think about like the Fibonacci spiral. That's your steering angle. You're like, as you turn in, you're doing more and more and more and more. And then right at the end, you're just like, wham, into the corner, you're unwinding really quickly. So it's a non-linear steering rate input. And that means your brakes are non-linear too, because they match, again, 100% available.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's amazing. One last question, and I'm going to hand off to Sabrina. So we all know that as you go through a weekend, the grip levels go up on the track because the track gets cleaned off and then rubber gets laid down. You just got more grip because of that. As a driver and as an engineer, what does that mean from the perspective of driving on a track that's gotten really sticky? And what do you do as a driver? As somebody who's going to be tuning the chassis, race engineering it. And I guess this applies not only to karting, of course, but also with the sports car stuff that you're doing now as well. How do you compensate for that?
So maybe we'll start the driving side, because there's similar between cars and karts. More so probably in karts, you look for and change your line. If the track's slippery, you may want to slide into the grippiest part to give you more distance between you and the edge of the track. Or if the track's very grippy and very predictable, you may be able to run a wider line because you know the grip will be there and you won't slide off the track. Now, the opposite is sometimes true. If there's too much rubber on the line, you have to keep your inside tires inside of the rubber because it'll actually stick too much and it'll bind the car down. So a go-kart doesn't have a differential, which means if you try to push it straight, it doesn't like going straight because the inside tire has to be off the ground. So if that inside tire is dragging through the heavy rubber, it'll slow you down. So it depends on the track. It's like racing in the rain. You got to figure it out as you go. So that is kind of track dependent. I think the big one, though, is you have to adjust your braking point. And that's hard to do because you've mentally decided, whether it's conscious or subconscious, this is where I can brake. This is the amount of deceleration this can do. And as the grip comes up, you have to continually push your brake zones. And the best drivers, the ones that are winning, especially in the shifter category, are slightly out braking themselves. In other words, going slightly too deep every lap. And I mean by inches, but not by Stephen the grandstand. That way they always know what the grip is really like. If you're braking at 90%, you're never going to know what 100 looks like. If you brake at 101, you know exactly what 100 looks like because you went just past it. So you can feel that 100 evolving and getting grippier and grippier and grippier. And so if you're going slightly past, you can constantly stay on that edge, and braking performance is really important as the grip comes up. In a car, one of the things that varies a lot is where the rubber is on the track. In karting, you don't see it as much, but in a car race, man, you can see rubber. I will be in a car for 3 hours. I jump in an endurance car and there's rubber on a curb that was never there before. So one, there's a lot of people using it. So maybe I missed that earlier in the day. And actually it's a section I should have been using the curb on. Or now it's just got so much rubber, it's grippy. I also can see bumps. When you hit the brakes and you go over a bump, you get a dark rubber spot and then no rubber. So I could see bumps I didn't realize were in braking zones, and now I can avoid them. Or sometimes you can brake later if you just go over the bump. That happened at COTA in December of this year. I was racing a WR race, COTA, great track, like a Formula 1 track, and they deal with this too. I could brake at the 110 marker or the 90 marker on the back straightaway. I couldn't brake at the 100 because of the bump. And I knew I couldn't, but I couldn't figure out what was going on. I just knew I'd blow the corner if I broke at the 100. But then as the rubber picked up, I could see there was rubber at 110. There was a dip at the 100 marker, and then there was another rise at the 90. And it was probably like 95 and 105. But point is I'm looking for rubbers building up. It's telling me what the surface looks like and where there might be opportunity to have more traction than I've found previously. Setup wise, race cars, probably too many variables there, but on a go-kart is pretty crisp. Generally, you want to make sure that you have enough front grip to make sure that you keep the rear free, and you generally go a little stiffer on the axle. But I'll say something that is probably controversial to most karters and might make some high dollar tuners upset, but setup on a go-kart matters very little. If your chassis is set up as it comes out of the box, the factory indicates, it's straight, everything's clean, nothing's binding up, it's correct. Your seat is in the correct position for your height and body weight and everything like that.
Yep. Engine
is properly tuned, not crazy, but just everything's right. There is less than 2/10 in the chassis setup. The only variable there, only gotcha, which I'm sure, someone's listening to this that's a tuner is going to be yelling at me. The variable there is a driver that maybe is unable to adapt to changing conditions very well will benefit more from that setup change, not because it's faster though, because it's easier for them to drive. It probably made the go-kart slower making the change, but it made them faster because they were more comfortable. And the goal for most people is to be the best they can be, not just drive the car everyone else is driving. I learned this in 21. I started taking racing, believe it or not, really seriously in 21, 22. Sounds crazy. I've been doing this a long time. But right around then is when my sponsor and I, Dave Pauly from Pauly Restaurant Group, we kind of decided money was not going to be an object anymore. We're just going to go race go-karts and do it right. And I started practicing. I never really practiced before. That sounds kind of crazy. I practiced maybe 2 times before a big race. Starting in 21, 22, I was practicing every weekend, and sometimes twice a week. So a big difference. What I did in 21 is I did not change the chassis setup at any of the pro races I went to. I only changed the gear ratio and the jetting for, because the traction links, so you have to change the gears. And you change the jets to blow up the engine. I ran a stock setup the entire year. And I realized very quickly that it was my driving that makes the difference, not the chassis. And I was simply complaining for no reason and adjusting the chassis out of its range to make me more comfortable, which just made me slightly faster, but I was nowhere near as fast as I should be. So now you'll find that most of the time my chassis setup is really, really, really close to standard. And it's been that way since 21. I do adjust it now. And it's funny, the standard setting actually has changed over the years. So my setup has actually become more what everyone runs now, not because of me. It's just I found that worked, that direction worked, and then the factory figured out it worked, and we all just kind of came to the same conclusion. So if you buy a name brand top line go-kart, anybody can do it that listen to this, walk into a karting shop, buy right off the shelf. That chassis can win the world championship. And I'm very sure of it.
Wow. That's actually so provocative of a statement, right? I mean, you said that there would be, you'll be getting hate mail for this, but yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And yet, having done enough karting myself, I know exactly what you mean. You can make changes and the kart doesn't really go that much faster or slower. That's when you know that, yeah, for sure.
It also helped me focus on myself. I was spending my time on me and my driving and not using excuses versus messing with the go-kart. Even as a mechanic, I wasn't actually doing the work in that case because I had big national races, but let you focus on what really matters. And that's what's so cool about go-karting. It's the driver. No one's ever going to convince me that, half a tenth, 1/10, 2/10, yes. But outside, if you're 3/4 of a second off, it is your driving. Doesn't mean you're a bad driver. You're missing something on the racetrack. You are over driving, you didn't know the racing line, whatever, a new track to you. That's fine, but it is you, which is amazing. You can arrive and drive with any of the major manufacturers at the Supernats, and you will have the same engine, chassis, everything I have. I could switch with you and there'd be no difference. And there's no forms of motorsport that are that equivalent. It's period. It's that close. I've had the opportunity to run an engine from Europe, engine from the top North American builder, the top Canadian builder, back to back with a factory TM, which is the brand engine I run, from Italy driver, and I can see the data. They're all so freaking close. It's actually unbelievable how many people, especially in the shifter side, blame engines and things and chassis. It's driving. That's what's awesome about it. You can go buy one and go race, and if you lose, as long as you can be self-reflective and know it was you, it makes you work harder. I work harder when I lose. That's for sure. Yeah. And that's what's awesome about it. I know it's not an equipment thing. It's a me thing.
Yeah. Okay. Sabrina, I'm going to hand the questions to you because obviously Jordon and I could go on forever talking about these nuances. I've got so much respect for everything he says that I'm not going to go to sleep early tonight. I can tell you that. I'm going to be thinking.
I love it. Well, I'm just soaking it in because I think there's so many pieces here, especially what you just said about setup, the question that I had was, well, does that apply then into the Formula One context, which is what most of our audience understands? And then when I think about the fact that setup is also predicated on development of the car, which is then predicated on the design of the car, which is all based on the rules, I can see where that could be true, but then I also see that it couldn't be true. Like I want to have another conversation just on that topic. And so maybe you'll be willing to come back and give us your perspective on that. I say that because I have some questions that I did prepare ahead of time that I really want to make sure we get at least in this first conversation with you, which is I referenced it in passing earlier. You're featured in Dick's karting documentary that was recently released. I don't know where this episode is going to air in relationship to the rest of the content we're putting out. But I wanted to ask you, what did you hope viewers would take away from your story specifically? And what aspects of karting do you think the documentary captures that fans who only watch Formula One might not understand about the sport at the grassroots level that you're at?
One, I hope people understand that they too can join in the fun. It is a sport you can join in if you choose to do so. But from a driver's perspective, it's important to know there's so much more going on than just driving in circles. Preparation, it's a year of years, 20 years of preparation, whatever, but it's a lot of preparation. There's a mindset. There's a mental workload over the weekend because you're not just driving, you're working on the setup. I mentioned it's only a couple tenths, but in karting, a couple tenths can be 7-8 spots at that level. So you're working on the setup, you're working on your driving, especially that race. It's a temporary circuit. No one has seen it before that weekend. So you're constantly learning what's working. You're looking at rubber on the racetrack we talked about. You're watching other drivers. I usually run around and spot around the track and watch other classes run to see what they're doing. Maybe I missed something, looking for bumps, what they're hitting and not hitting. That was a big one. Actually, that year the documentary was filmed, turn one was fifth gear, almost flat, extremely fast. So watching the rubber build up there, knowing how much faster I could go before I even got on track was an advantage. So I think that's the thing listeners should notice is how much we talk about not just, the battle. It's like all the stuff we're doing to prepare for it. The weekend, you're on track for, I don't know, let's call it on a heat day. You're on track for a total maybe an hour and a half and you're there for 9 hours. You're not sitting around. You're constantly mentally, if you're not literally talking to your mechanic about the setup, so mentally working on the next change, I'm reflecting on the previous session. I use a tabular format mentally. Like turn one, was it better or worse? 0 meaning it was the same as the session before. +1 meaning it was better. Or -1 meaning it was a little bit worse. And I add up my numbers for all the corners. I say, I'm a +3. So the changes I made worked. I also do this in a forecasting way. If I want to make a change, I'm going to say, it's going to be better in 3 corners and worse in 4. Okay, well, it's a negative one. I'm not going to do it. So I'm going through all of this. And then I do some visualization as well. I definitely try to close my eyes, picture I should be able to picture a lap and all the sounds of the engine. That's really the most important thing. Maybe people don't realize, and it's not necessarily related to the documentary, but the engine sound is a majority of what the driver takes in for speed beyond just stereoscopic vision, because you don't have a speedometer. I mean, you do technically, but you don't see it. You can't possibly look at that little gauge when it's vibrating and it's bouncing around. You're using the engine sound to understand how fast you're going. So if you can close your eyes and listen to the engine as it's going through the gears and going through the corners through a lap, you can really do a free practice. You practice while you're not on track. And we've seen, I think, a couple drivers. I'm trying to think of the last one I saw. I think Sergio Perez did this and it became kind of a meme, or it was a reel. And he could visualize, drive, and do every gear just closing his eyes the whole track. I think Max did a deal where they play him like 10 seconds or 5 seconds of a racetrack. You could tell what track it was, all off the sound. So that's not a party trick. That's how your brain determines the speed you can carry through a corner.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you made that connection, because I did see those videos and I had always wondered, does that translate across the various disciplines? So let me ask you this then. You've achieved remarkable success in American karting, multiple national championships, as we've talked about. So for American drivers and their families, what do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of trying to build a racing career from the United States?
So I'm going to, in this context, career means Formula One, of course.
Well, I mean, I would say when one of the things that we want to highlight is that karting is its own discipline itself and deserves such respect. And I think that's why I have such respect for you. And we want to enlighten our audience to realize the full scope of motorsport, even if Formula One is the entree that they came into. So feel free to take this question whichever direction you want to take it.
Yeah, so I'd say even as little as 10 years ago, I don't think U.S. karting was competitive enough to create a Formula One driver. You're only as good as those who you beat. If you're the fastest guy, you're not going to get much faster, just nature of it. I think that's really changed, though, especially in the younger categories. I don't follow the younger categories super closely because I mainly focus on senior category. I only coach generally adults. It's just my style works better because I'm very technical. And if they don't understand what I'm saying, I'm not as valuable to them. But it's crazy. I see these names that I'm like, I watch a race in Europe now. And I'm like, I know that kid. He races in the US. I've heard it a million times. And that wasn't like that 10 years ago. So I think now, you using Formula One as the barometer where you're trying to go, you spend karting in the US absolutely fine. 12 or 13, you got to move to Europe for F4. So I don't think cars have changed. I think if you want to race in Formula One, you have to be in an F4 car at 12 or 13, which is when I think they're starting now, and it has to be in Europe. But I think karting now, you can take the first part of your career in the US and be as good as anyone. I think even the senior categories are getting there. We see the Europeans coming over now and not necessarily winning. They do win, of course, but they're not dominating, I should say. But I think in the senior categories, there's still a little lag there. I think you'll see that European drivers are, on average, a bit better.
I think that's wonderful. I think so succinct and good context. I think to some of the other conversations, don't you, Dick, that we've had on the podcast of helping parents especially think about the development of their young racers. So let me ask you this then, Jordon, we haven't really had an opportunity, but tell us about Musser Performance and where you want to take it. Like, what's your 5-year vision? And are you building this to be primarily a racing consultancy, a product company, or something else?
I haven't fully defined what that looks like. Fortunately, it's not a primary source of income for me. So I'm not saying I don't think it's serious. I mean, I've invested a lot of time and energy into it. Just being more involved in the sport, being deeper involved in it is actually the primary goal. Yeah, I love this sport. I love motorsports. I love karting especially. I want to make racers' lives easier. Most of the things I develop are taking a really obvious problem that no one really wanted to deal with and make it better. I want to release parts that make sense because it's not, again, how I pay my bills. I don't need to release a bunch of stuff so people buy stuff from me. Instead of company A, they buy from me. I don't want to have the same thing company A has because that's not what I'm trying to do. I just want to build something that's better. So people are like, oh, that's really neat. That's a neat way to solve that problem. That's what I enjoy. So I'm only releasing products that make sense. So I'm not really pushing the stuff out there. Part of Musser Technical is where I run through my consultancy and driver coaching programs as well. So it all rolls into one to build a deeper bond with the community and give me more opportunities to be in the seat or coach people and maybe sell some parts. And they all work together for what is really, it's obviously a very serious hobby. I say it's a hobby because it's not my primary source of income, but a very serious thing I do. And I get to be involved in more of it. And they all kind of bounce off each other. Like the camera thing came up because I offered free coaching in 2025. If you race shifter cards at the regional level, all you do is bring me your Micron or your cart. I would download the data and give you free coaching. And I had a few guys on practice days kind of approach me. I said, what, I'll help. Let's do it. And they have old equipment or the camera's broke. Oh, yeah, I have a GoPro and I hate the mount. It always breaks or the camera shuts off. And I was like, man, you spend all this money to be here, hundreds of dollars a year for the day, tires and fuel and just driving there. And if you buy a good mount, which there wasn't really anything available, and a good camera, we can do so much more together. And you have cool videos to show your buddies when you get back from the race weekend, right? You can show it on YouTube and show them what you did all weekend. So It was one of those kind of obvious things for me. Also, the current solutions were not well engineered. I'm not saying not well designed, but they were really engineered. They were kind of just put together and they were not optimized for shifter car racing. Shifter car racing, unfortunately, is not the largest category. I personally think it's the best, and I think everyone should drive a shifter, but it's not the biggest. Agree. So I knew you would. Parts are not meant for shifters because it doesn't make sense from a pure financial point of view. If I'm a product manager at a go-kart part manufacturer, I'm going after the biggest group of customers, the biggest segmentation I can. In this case, I went after the shifters. I saw a huge hole, and that's super nuts. I sold every single one I had on me. I didn't bring enough extra because once people saw them, I'm not really marketing it. I push out a little bit, but not a whole lot. But once people saw them, they're like, oh, I have to have that. And like every person I've coached that has paid for me to come teach them, in other words, they vested a decent amount of money in my time, they have bought one before I even showed up. They're like, yeah, show me what to order, because I want to make sure I have this on my cart when you get there. So it's all kind of one big package of being just more involved in it.
Okay, so then from your perspective as both a racer and now a product developer, in the more hobby sense, it's not your primary income. Where do you think families should invest their resources if they want their young driver to develop properly? Is it seat time, coaching, equipment, data, something else entirely?
So a good driving coach is invaluable, but it's also expensive. The most important thing is seat time, purposeful seat time. One of the things I see in young drivers and even masters drivers, I was guilty of this until 21 when I started working at it differently, is in every other sport, you run drills. When you learn to play football, you don't play football every day. You throw the ball, you kick the ball, you run routes. I'm not a football guy, so I think I got all those terms right. But you do things to practice specific skills that add up to the total package. And in karting, in cars, period, just motorsports, unless you have a professional coach who really knows how to do that, most parents are just letting their kids drive. And that's great. So purposeful practice, you're practicing with purpose, you're attempting to do something. And it's not just go faster, because going faster does not make you faster. Focus on braking zones, one braking zone, and making that one braking zone optimized. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's seat time is number one. Today, not to scare people away, but for a Formula One driver, they're probably in a go-kart 2 to 3, 4, 5 days a week on average. That's just the fact. That's the way a lot of pro drivers are now. You can have a great long career. I'm 45. I love racing. I have a real job. I drive all the time, but once a week's enough for me. I got other things to do. My professional career also, it really was predicated on the experience I had in motorsports. I don't think I'd be successful in the real world as an engineer and the ultimate business leader if I hadn't gone through the trials and tribulations of getting your butt kicked in motorsport and constantly evolving and learning. So I think it's a great thing every family should do. But if you really are focused on, I want my kid to have an opportunity to go to Formula One, you need to be in a go-kart 3-4 days a week pretty consistently. And if that seems like a challenge, the rest of the ladder is going to be impossible. That's easy compared to what the next steps require. So seat time, and I think that's even for a guy, a family that's just, I want my kid to do this. I want to see how good he is. I want to have a great time, mother, son, daughter, father, whatever, bonding experience. Drive once a week. I think that's a good number. That's like the minimum threshold. As long as you do it with purpose. You just drive around, you won't get better. But if you drive and practice things, you will get better.
Yeah, I like that. I agree with that. I think that if with anything that we do, intentionality is so vital to actually improvement and success. Otherwise, you're just wasting time and resources. So I also understand that you are an ambassador for Holly Performance. Can you tell us about that a little bit? The relationship, what does that mean for your racing program?
Yeah, so my main goal representing Holly at the racetrack, and I'm focused on Stilo, Simpson, Race Quip, and Han, so the motorsport safety division. My goal is to help customers at the track if they have an issue, if they have a new product or something, but also listen to what they're saying so that we can develop better products. When I'm not with customers, I'm developing new stuff. So I'm trying out the latest suit. I'm providing feedback. I had something like 6 or 7 versions of the suit we just launched. I even had a local driver, when I injured my backer this year, I had a local driver, Noah, do some testing for me as my responsibility as, a Holly ambassador. I was supposed to do this and I couldn't move at the time. Old man problem. And so I got a young buck to do some laps for me. So I get to develop the latest safety products for karting and motorsports in general, with karting being the focus, but also help the customers to make sure they're having the best experience of the products. A lot of people, like an example, a lot of people didn't realize we had fog-free visors on the Stilo helmets because they come with anti-fog coating, but then we have a double layer that it does not fog, period. It's like a scuba diving deal.
Oh, wow.
But no one knew it existed. And so we have customers at the track that are kind of complaining and they knew about me and they came complaining to me. And they're like, hey, my visor's fogging. What can I do? I was like, here, borrow mine, but here's the part of me you order and it won't fog. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. So it's a representative in front of the people that then those people, because I'm racing at the pro level races, I'm interacting with people that go back to the tracks and they're usually their local hero, right? Even the guy that finished 10th at a national championship is dominating his local track. So now I'm engaging these people to go back to their local tracks and then extend that same knowledge down through grassroots. So I can multiply my time through interacting with guys at these races.
Yeah.
That is such a wise and fantastic way of getting information throughout the country and throughout the series. That's wonderful. Well, yeah. I have actually a ton more questions, but I know that time is fleeting. So I will turn it back to Dick to close us out. And if anything, I'll put in the plug that 1, everyone needs to watch the documentary that Dick has created, because now you have heard the backstory to one of the featured racers in the documentary. And then two, the other plug I'm going to put is Jordon. I have so many more questions. You're going to have to answer them. So would you come back again and do another conversation with us?
Sounds awesome. Love to.
Dick, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jordon, thank you for sharing a lot of the conversation around your thoughts on the driving. Man, I learned a lot, and it's important, I think, with me finally coming off of injury and able to start driving again. I'm sitting here just kind of going, okay, man, you talk about practicing with purpose, dude, you just lit the fire. And so I'm looking forward to getting out and actually practicing with purpose. That's going to be fantastic. So grateful for your time and your thoughts tonight, Jordon. And of course, me, you'll see me at the track eventually, and it'll be good to see you in person. But thank you for your time tonight. This has been great.
Yeah, I appreciate you both. It's over 25 years now, roughly, of motorsports. I built this dictionary of things, and I love sharing it. That's the most important thing to me, is helping everyone else enjoy it as much as I do. And if I can speed their skill set up and let them jump over a few steps that I had to do, that's awesome. So I'm looking forward to talking to you all again.
That sounds great.
I will say, Jordon, listening to you, that's very obvious that you're not trying to be a gatekeeper, even as you reach such heights in your career, that you're wanting to bring others along, and it'll improve the sport. It'll improve the experience for the fans, and it's a testament to your character. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, friends, what did you think of this conversation? We'd love to hear from you. What questions are you wrestling with? What should we dive into next? Send them to Sabrina at 2guysagirlandf1.com. We read every single one, and frankly, your questions are usually more interesting than what we'd come up with on our own. And with that, let me say, this ends our conversation. But we'll keep talking, and you can keep listening in, because we're just two guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.